Sometimes, life changes in the quietest of moments. On a scorching afternoon in downtown San Diego, Officer Carla Mendoza approached a luxury sedan parked illegally. She had no idea that behind the tinted glass sat a man whose name graced magazine covers, a man worth hundreds of millions. But what happened when he rolled down his window didn't just alter her day, it altered her life. The afternoon sun draped the streets of downtown San Diego in waves of heat, distorting the air like a mirage. Officer Carla Mendoza adjusted her uniform collar, the fabric already sticking to the back of her neck. Her patrol route took her past coffee shops buzzing with late lunches, business towers blinking with tinted glass, and sidewalks where life never seemed to pause. She didn't mind the noise. It was the silence that made her uneasy. She had written 7 citations so far, and her feet throbbed in her boots. Another double shift. Another day trying to stay invisible while enforcing the law. But duty was duty. Then she saw it. A Rolls-Royce, ghost deep, black, paint flawless, its surface catching sunlight like silk. The kind of car people slowed down to stare at, even in a city full of ambition. It was parked directly beneath a bold red sign. No parking anytime. Carla stared at the sign, then the car, then back at the sign. No mistake. She exhaled through her nose and pulled out her ticket book, fingers moving from muscle memory. Pen to paper, words forming in neat lines, and then the soft hum of something mechanical. The driver's side window began to glide down. It was always this part that annoyed her. The excuses, the flattery, the attempts to charm their way out of a simple fine. She kept her eyes down, steady on the page. "Officer," a voice said, calm, polite, not entitled. "Is there a problem?" Carla glanced up. The man in the driver's seat looked to be in his 30s, neatly kept, though his shirt collar was loosened, and the knot of his tie sagged, like he'd been wearing it too long. He didn't look like someone who was used to begging or bluffing. His gaze was direct but not harsh. There was something tired in his eyes. "You're in a restricted zone," Carla said, her tone neutral. "This is a citation for illegal parking." "I understand," he replied, and there was no protest in his voice. "I was on a call I couldn't take while driving. I pulled over for just a moment. I knew it wasn't ideal." Carla kept writing. Her training told her to stay firm. But her instinct, something deeper, something human, hesitated. The man looked down at his hands resting on the steering wheel. "It was my mother. She's in the hospital. I didn't want to miss the call." The words weren't meant to manipulate. They were just spoken, softly, like he was talking more to himself than to her. Carla paused, pen hovering mid-sentence. She had heard every excuse in the book, but something about the way he said it, no urgency, no defensiveness, tugged at something. Inside her, it wasn't his voice. It was his silence between the words. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said after a moment. "But the zone's clear. I still have to write the ticket." "Of course," he said, offering a small nod. "You're just doing your job." She tore off the slip and handed it to him. Their fingers didn't touch, but the distance felt strangely close. The man looked at the ticket, not with frustration, but with the solemnity of someone whose mind was miles away. "Thank you, Officer Mendoza," he said, glancing at her name tag. His gratitude felt real, not rehearsed, a rare thing in her line of work. She nodded once, then turned to walk away. The sound of her footsteps swallowed by the city, but something clung to her chest, heavier than usual. It wasn't the heat or the fatigue, it was the moment, the man, that strange calm in his voice. That evening, as she sat alone at her modest apartment, still half in uniform, her mind kept circling back to that man in the black Rolls-Royce. She had met thousands of people in her work, but this one, he stayed in her mind like a name you can't quite remember, yet somehow can't forget. She thought of his eyes, not sad exactly, but carrying the kind of weight that made you wonder what he had walked through to speak so softly. Across the city, in a penthouse far above the din of traffic and people, Julian Vega placed the ticket on his kitchen counter, next to unopened letters and a half-eaten meal. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Outside the window, the lights of the city flickered like stars trying too hard to shine. He leaned back against the marble island, remembering her the way she didn't flinch at his car, his clothes, or even his name, which she hadn't asked for. Her voice hadn't wavered. Her eyes hadn't sought anything. They had only seen and he realized something he hadn't in a long time. He missed being seen, not as a CEO, not as a millionaire, just as a man. He picked up the citation again, stared at the name printed on the bottom. Officer Carla Mendoza. Somewhere, deep inside, something shifted, and neither of them knew that the quiet moment they shared would become the beginning of something neither expected, something that would test their strength, confront their pasts, and challenge everything they thought they knew about life, choices, and the people we meet when we least expect it. Sometimes, the smallest moments are the start of the biggest changes, and neither of them was ready for what would come. Next, ChatGPT said. The following morning began like any other, for Officer Carla Mendoza. Coffee, just slightly too bitter. Uniformed neatly, pressed, boots shined but still bearing the scuff marks of the city. The routine was muscle memory by now. Get up, get ready, get going. But beneath the surface of her practiced movements was something that hadn't been there in years. Distraction. She couldn't stop thinking about the man from yesterday. The black Rolls-Royce, the gentle voice, the unspoken sadness in his eyes. He hadn't argued, he hadn't demanded, he had simply accepted, and thanked her. People didn't thank her, not genuinely, not like that. She'd meant to forget him, like she forgot the hundreds of faces she saw each week. But something about him lingered, not because he was wealthy, or handsome, or mysterious. It was because in that brief moment, when he looked at her, it felt like he truly saw her, not the badge, not the uniform, just her. She shook the thought away as she stepped into her patrol car. She had work to do. Thinking too much on the job could get her in trouble. Meanwhile, several floors above the noise and breath of the city, Julian Vega stood silently on the edge of his glass balcony. The morning air was still, the sky smeared with early sunlight. He held his phone in his hand, but didn't unlock it. Messages from lawyers, assistants, board members waited, but they didn't matter, not today. His mother had fallen into a deeper sleep overnight. The doctors said, a coma, likely. She might wake up, she might not. He was a man used to controlling things, markets, deals, outcomes, but this was different. This was the kind of helpless that no amount of money could fix. He felt like a boy again, small, lost, alone. And yet, strangely, the image that kept returning to his mind wasn't the sterile hospital room or the blinking monitors. It was her, the officer, Mendoza. He couldn't explain why. Just that in the middle of his crumbling world, her presence had felt steady, grounded, real. It was absurd, he told himself. He didn't even know her. She probably didn't remember him. She had probably written a dozen more tickets since then. Still, he found himself pulling up his phone not to read emails or check stocks but to look up the city's public employee directory, just to see, just to confirm she existed beyond that moment. Carla Mendoza, Traffic Enforcement Division, 8 years of service, no complaints, commendation for community outreach, lived in Barrio Logan. Julian closed the browser and let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Somewhere in the maze of thoughts, he decided something. He wasn't going to let that moment be the end of it. Across the city, Carla sat at her usual lunch, spat an old, family-run taqueria with handwritten menus and chairs that rocked unevenly. She was halfway through her meal when she noticed something. A man standing outside, not just any man. Him. She blinked, unsure if it was the sunlight or her memory playing tricks. But no, it was definitely him. Same face, same quiet posture. Except now he looked out of place, not in the way rich people sometimes did in humble places, but in the way someone unsure of themselves looks when they're stepping into a world that doesn't usually invite them in. Julian stepped inside, scanning the tables, eyes landing on hers. For a moment, he hesitated, like he might turn round and leave. But then he walked over, slow and deliberate, carrying nothing but a soft smile. "Officer Mendoza," he said, "I hope I'm not intruding." Carla was too surprised to answer right away. Her first instinct was to be defensive. Cautious. Was he upset? Was he trying to get out of the ticket? But then she saw it again, that same look in his eyes. Like someone who wasn't looking for an advantage, just a connection. She gestured to the seat across from her. "It's just Carla," she said. And ... "No, you're not intruding." He sat down, careful, like he didn't want to break something fragile between them. "I wanted to thank you," he said after a pause. She arched an eyebrow. "For the citation," he chuckled. "No, well, yes, but more than that, for being honest, fair. You reminded me that some rules still matter, and that not everyone looks the other way." Carla leaned back slightly. Compliments made her suspicious. but his felt different, less like praise, more like confession. "I was just doing my job," she said quietly. "Maybe," Julian replied, "but you did it in a way that made me feel human again." Those words hit her harder than she expected. For a moment, they just sat there, two strangers from two different worlds, bound together by a fleeting street encounter. Yet now, it felt like they'd known each other longer. Carla finally asked, "You said your mother was in the hospital. How is she?" The smile vanished from his face, and he looked down. "She's in a coma now. We're waiting." "I'm sorry," Carla said, and for once, the words didn't feel automatic. They felt honest. He nodded, grateful, and something unspoken passed between them again. The kind of silence that said more than words ever could. Julian stood after a while, not wanting to overstay. "Thank you for letting me sit." Carla tilted her head. "Are you always this polite?" "Only when I'm nervous," he said with a grin. She didn't smile, not fully, but the corners of her lips curved just enough as he turned to leave. She said, "You never told me your name." He paused, hand on the door. "Julian," he said. "Julian Vega." Carla's eyes flickered. She knew that name. Everyone did. But she said nothing, because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about who he was. She was thinking about who he might be. As he walked back into the sunlight, she watched him go, something quiet blooming in her chest, and neither of them knew that this second meeting, like the first, was no accident. It was the beginning of a ripple neither of them could stop. Asterisk rain arrived unexpectedly the following morning, tracing soft lines across the city's windows and softening the sharp edges of San Diego's normally sun-drenched skyline. It wasn't a storm, just a gentle, persistent drizzle, the kind that blurred lights into halos and made even the busiest streets feel quieter. Carla Mendoza stood at the precinct side entrance, coffee in hand, listening to the raindrops hit the rim of a metal trash can. She hadn't slept well. Her mind had played a loop of yesterday's brief lunch, and every time she thought she had sorted through it, something new surfaced: his voice, his calm, the way he'd said he felt human again. That last part echoed more than it should have. She'd spent years teaching herself how to be unshakable, to walk past whispers, shove aside flirtation, and pretend the occasional cruelty of the job didn't settle on her like dust. But for the first time in a long while, someone had spoken to her as though she wasn't just a uniform, like she was something more. And that simple recognition had stirred something she wasn't ready for. Across the city, in a hospital room, drenched in pale light, Julian Vega sat at the edge of a bed where machines hummed steadily beside his mother. Her chest rose and fell in slow rhythm, aided by a ventilator. Her hand, so small now, rested on the sheets, motionless. He had been staring at that hand for an hour, hoping it would twitch, hoping for a miracle, but no miracles came. He sighed, wiping a hand over his face, and stood. His assistant had called twice already about a meeting with potential investors from Dubai. His board had sent him a spreadsheet he hadn't opened. Somewhere out there, business was waiting for him to make another powerful move. But all Julian Vega could think about was how a stranger in a city uniform had made him feel more grounded in 10 minutes than a lifetime of wealth and power ever had. As he walked down the sterile hallway, phone silent in his pocket, he made another decision, one that surprised even him. He wasn't going to his office. He was going back to where it all started. Carla, meanwhile, was patrolling in the Marina district when her radio crackled. Nothing serious, just a report of a delivery truck blocking access near an upscale hotel. She sighed, turned the wheel, and drove slowly through the drizzle. When she pulled up, there it was, not a delivery truck, but a sleek dark SUV with flashes on, parked awkwardly in front of the entrance, and next to it, holding an umbrella, was Julian Vega. She stopped the cruiser, unsure whether to laugh or roll her eyes, but curiosity won. She stepped out. "I'm pretty sure you're trying to collect a full set of citations," she called across the sidewalk. Julian smiled, rain collecting at his collar. "Guilty. You shouldn't be parked here, I know," he said icily, "but I was hoping you might walk with me before you wrote it." Carla raised an eyebrow. "In the rain?" "In the rain," he said, offering her the umbrella. She looked at him for a long moment. Then, almost without thinking, she took the umbrella and walked beside him as they drifted away from the hotel. The sidewalks were mostly empty. Rain made people stay inside, made the city quieter. For once, there was no noise to fill the spaces between words. They didn't talk at first. They just walked. Carla noticed how he didn't rush to fill the silence. He moved like someone used to waiting, like someone who finally understood that time wasn't a resource to spend, but a gift to notice. Finally, Julian said, "You ever feel like the world's watching you live someone else's life?" Carla turned toward him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "Yeah," she said, "more than I'd like to admit. I spent so long trying to be what everyone expected, building something, becoming someone, and now that I've made it, I don't know what I've actually built." "You built something," she said. "Maybe it's just not what you thought it would be." He nodded slowly. "When I saw you yesterday, I thought, here's someone who doesn't need to prove anything, you just are. It reminded me of something I lost." Carla stopped walking. "Julian," she said slowly, "you don't know me. You think you do, because I wrote you a ticket and had lunch with you once, but you don't. I'm not some grounded force of wisdom. I have baggage, doubts, scars. I'm not the person you're romanticizing." "I don't need perfect," he said. "I just need real." Those words hit her differently. They stood in the rain a while longer, neither moving. Carla looked at him, not the clothes, not the car waiting in the distance, but the man. Raw and uncertain and willing to admit he didn't have all the answers. "Why are you really here?" she asked. "Because my mother might never wake up," he said. "And if that's true, then I don't want to keep living on autopilot. I want to know what matters again. I want to find people who remind me how to feel." "And you think that's me?" "I don't know," Julian admitted. "But when I was with you, I didn't feel empty. That's not nothing." Carla lowered the umbrella just enough that the rain touched her face. "You're not looking for a cop, Julian. You're looking for someone to fix something you can't name, and I'm not sure I'm the right person to do that." "I'm not asking you to fix anything," he said. "I'm asking if we can keep walking." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't walk away either, because part of her, the part that had been silent for years, was whispering that maybe she was also tired of walking alone. And somewhere in the drizzle between them, something fragile began to bloom. The next few days passed like soft echoes, quiet, uncertain, but full of undercurrents neither Julian nor Carla could ignore. There were no dramatic confessions, no sweeping changes, only small, steady moments, text messages with no pretense, coffee shared without ceremony, and silences that didn't feel like absence. But on the fourth day, something shifted. It started with a phone call. Julian was standing at his office window, staring out at the clouds above the bay, when his phone buzzed. He expected another investor or one of the lawyers urging him to prepare for his father's foundation gala. Instead, it was from the hospital. "Mr. Vega," the nurse said gently, "your mother opened her eyes today." The words struck him like thunder. His fingers tightened around the phone. "She's not fully alert yet, but she responded to her name. The doctors say it's a good sign. You should come." He left the building without speaking to anyone. At the hospital, Julian stepped into the room and saw her still frail, still tethered to machines, but her eyes fluttered open again when she heard his voice. He held her hand, the one that had once cradled his cheek when he was 5, the one that used to button his coat when he was too small to do it himself. Her fingers barely moved, but he felt it. A squeeze, a sign. "I am here, Mama." A whisperer than I am here. That night, after the nurses had urged him to rest, Julian found himself driving without direction. His body was exhausted, but his heart was alive in a way it hadn't been for years. He drove past city blocks that blurred in the dark until instinct led him to the edge of Balboa Park. And there she was. Carla sat on a bench near the fountain, still in uniform, sipping from a paper cup. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "Let me guess," she said. "You needed air." He nodded. "And maybe you." She slid over, making space without words. "My mom woke up," he said after a pause. Carla looked at him, expression unreadable. "That's incredible, Julian. I'm happy for you." She said my name, tried to smile. He swallowed the lump in his throat. "I didn't realize how much I missed her until she came back." They sat in silence again, the soft splash of the fountain masking the weight of things unsaid. After a while, Carla asked, "Do you ever think about the person you were before everything got complicated?" "All the time," he said. "I think he was more afraid, more naive, but maybe also ... more honest." Carla nodded slowly. "When I was a kid, I used to believe I'd grow up and change the world. Not in some dramatic superhero way, just by helping people, one at a time. Somewhere along the way, I got tired, not of the work, just of believing I mattered. You do, Julian said, without hesitation. She looked at him, caught off guard. You say that like you know. I do, he replied. Because when I met you, I was crumbling inside. I was losing my mother, my identity. And you didn't save me with a grand gesture. You saved me by just being solid, present, real. Carla turned her eyes back toward the fountain, blinking harder than usual. I didn't do anything special, she said. Maybe not to you, Julian said gently. But sometimes the smallest light is the one that pulls someone out of the darkest place. And then, before the moment could collapse under its own weight, she said something unexpected. Come with me tomorrow. He looked over. What community center? I volunteer with the youth program. Some of those kids, they remind me what it means to start over. To dream, even when the world tells you not to. Julian didn't hesitate. I'll be there. The next day, the energy at the community center was raw, unfiltered. Kids from tough neighborhoods, kids who'd seen more than they should, filled the basketball court and art rooms. Carla moved among them like she belonged, not as a figure of authority, but as someone who had once been one of them. Julian watched from the edge at first. He saw the way they listened to her, not because they had to, but because they trusted her. It wasn't fire, it was respect. Eventually, she pulled him into a circle of teenagers working on a mural. This is Julian, she said. He's a friend. The kids looked up at him. One asked bluntly, You a cop too? Julian shook his head. No, I run a company, but right now, I'm just here to listen. That was all it took. The tension eased. The kids kept painting dot, and slowly, Julian began to talk. He told them about losing his way, about being successful but feeling hollow. He didn't try to impress them, he just told the truth. Afterward, one of the older teens pulled Carla aside. He's cool, she said. Different from the others you bring in. Carla smiled. Yeah, he's trying. That night, as they walked back to their cars, Julian turned to her. I think today was the first time I felt useful in years, he said. That's because you were, she replied. They stood by her cruiser, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Then, Carla said quietly, You know, I thought you were just another rich guy with a nice car and a smooth voice. But you surprised me. How so? You showed up. And there, under the street lamp glow, they stood quietly to people who had nothing in common on paper, yet everything in the spaces in between. Not lovers yet, not strangers anymore, just two hearts, slowly, courageously, learning how to meet. In the middle, Julian couldn't sleep that night. He had returned home hours ago, but something inside him had shifted in a way that didn't let him rest. He sat on his balcony, the cool breeze brushing his skin, and stared at the flickering lights across the city skyline, lights that once symbolized ambition and power, but now reminded him of how many lives were unfolding silently behind those windows. Lives like Carlos, lives like those kids at the center, lives that had struggled, hoped, survived. He thought about how he had spent so many years building walls made of boardrooms, titles, contracts, and armored charm. But Carla, she had walked right through without trying to tear them down. She didn't need to. She had simply been herself, steadfast, clear-eyed, honest. That kind of presence wasn't common in his world. It was rare, it was real, and it was changing him. And yet, despite everything blooming quietly between them, Julian knew something was coming, something that might test it all. He felt it. The following morning, while visiting the hospital, Julian overheard a tense conversation between the hospital administrator and one of the staff members. His mother's private room, secured thanks to a sizable donation he had made months ago, was under review. Apparently, the Vega Foundation's funding was being challenged. Julian's heart dropped. That couldn't be right. He had set up the funding years ago, and it was watertight unless someone from the board was undermining it. A betrayal, one that could risk his mother's care, and possibly more. He walked straight into his office that afternoon. A fire inside him he hadn't felt in weeks. He pulled up internal reports, accounts, records, and there it was, a pattern of reallocations, quiet but deliberate, diverting funds from the foundation into a shell company registered under the name of someone he had once trusted, his former CFO. Julian leaned back in his chair, stunned. He had always known corporate loyalty was fragile, but this felt like a knife in the back. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal, and if word of this got out, it would tarnish not just his name, but everything the foundation had built. including the community center Carla loved. Suddenly, this wasn't just about his mother, it was about Carla, about those kids, about the one place that had helped him feel human again. He picked up the phone. "Carla, can we meet tonight? There's something I need to tell you." She sensed the tension in his voice and agreed without hesitation. They met at the same bench by the fountain, only this time there was no quiet peace between them. Julian's jaw was tense, his hands clenched. "What's going on?" she asked. Softly, "I found something," he said. "My CFO, he's been moving money, not just from the company, from the foundation, from your community center, from my mother's care." Carla stared at him, her brow furrowing. "Are you serious?" Julian nodded. "Dead serious." "What are you going to do?" "That's the thing," he said, voice low. "If I go public, it becomes a scandal. Headlines, lawsuits. The whole company could crumble. Investors will panic. But if I stay quiet, more damage gets done. And people like you, those kids, my mom, they'll suffer first." Carla didn't speak right away. She let the silence stretch. Then she looked him square in the eye. "Then you don't stay quiet." Julian blinked. "Even if it destroys everything?" Carla nodded. "Because the truth is always worth more than a lie wrapped in comfort." He looked at her for a long time. "I thought I had to protect the empire, but maybe it was never mine to protect in the first place. Maybe it was built on the wrong ground," she said. "But you still have the chance to build something better." And just like that, he knew what he had to do. The next day, Julian walked into a press conference flanked by legal counsel and a weary conscience. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. The city buzzed with anticipation. He stepped up to the podium. "My name is Julian Vega," he began, "and I am here today not as a CEO, but as a son, a citizen, and a man who has failed to see the rot growing beneath his own success." He told the truth. All of it. The headlines exploded. Julian Vega exposes corruption in his own company. Millionaire CEO risks empire to save community programs. Foundation funds rescued after Vega's bold confession. Some investors pulled out. Some called him reckless. But others, those who understood integrity, reached out with support. His stock fell, but his dignity rose, and Carla watched it all from a distance, proud and afraid, because even as he stood tall before the world, she knew something was breaking inside him. Later that week, he returned to the community center. The kids welcomed him like nothing had changed, but Carla saw the weight he carried. She walked over as he sat watching them play. "I didn't think I'd feel this empty after doing the right thing," he admitted. "You're not empty," she said. "You're just finally making space." He looked at her, eyes tired but alive. "For what?" "For whatever comes next," she said, then added with a half smile. "Maybe even someone who brings you bad coffee and impossible questions." He smiled for the first time in days. The truth had cost him, but it had also given him something rare, a second chance, not just at redemption, but at something deeper. And as they stood side by side, watching the kids laugh, the storm behind them slowly cleared. The city never truly slept. But that night, it felt quieter than usual, as if even the streets were holding their breath. Julian sat alone on the steps outside the community center, his elbows on his knees, fingers laced, heart heavy with both exhaustion and something else, hope laced with fear. Inside, the kids were wrapping up an evening art program. He could hear the faint echoes of laughter, sneakers squeaking on floors, brushes tapping against plastic cups. It was a melody of healing, of futures being rewritten with every stroke of paint. Carla stood by the door, leaning against the frame, watching him. From a distance, she could read the weight in his shoulders, the way his body held quiet grief beneath the outward strength. "You saved something big this week," she said finally, stepping toward him. He didn't look up right away. "I didn't save it. I just stopped letting it fall. That's more than most would do." He turned his head toward her. "I thought once I told the truth, things would feel lighter. But instead, it's like the pieces are still falling, just slower now." "They are," she said softly, sitting beside him. "But now you're not dodging them. You're catching them. That's how rebuilding starts." He looked down at his hands. "You ever wonder if you're strong enough to carry what comes next?" "All the time," she admitted. There was a silence between them again, but this one was full of shared understanding, quiet courage, and the bond formed when two people saw each other, not just as they were, but as they were trying to become. "I've been thinking," Julian began, hesitating slightly, "about stepping down." Carla turned, brows raised. From the company, from the board. I've got enough to live, and the foundation can run independently now with the right leadership. But me, I want to be somewhere I actually matter. I want to see the change I helped make. Not from a penthouse. From here, from the ground. She was quiet for a moment, eyes scanning his face. You mean that? More than I've meant anything in a long time. There was a pause, a long one. Then Carla said something he never expected. My precinct is short-staffed. They need someone who knows finance, corruption cases, paper trails, someone with guts. Julian laughed just a breath, but it was real. You want me to become a cop? No, she said, grinning. I want you to help clean the mess from the other side. Maybe help kids like the ones in there, before they become another headline. Use what you know to build something honest. Julian looked back at the glowing windows of the center. You think they'd trust me? They already do. You just need to believe it yourself. Suddenly, one of the kids burst out the front door, holding a torn soccer ball and wearing a crooked smile. Julian, you coming, or what? We need a goalie. He blinked. Startled, Garlett nudged him. You're being summoned, Mr. Vega. He stood, slowly, brushing dust off his slacks. You realize, I haven't played soccer in 20 years. Then you're overdue. And just like that, Julian ran onto the makeshift field behind the center, his laughter joining the others in the night air. He wasn't good, not even close, but the kids didn't care. They cheered for him, laughed with him, teased him without hesitation, because he wasn't a suit to them anymore. He was one of them. Carla stood watching from the edge, arms crossed but smiling, really smiling, not just politely. This man, once unreachable, was now chasing soccer balls in dress shoes and defending a rusted goalpost with the same seriousness he once reserved for corporate takeovers. It was messy, unpolished, beautiful. Later that night, after the games ended and goodbyes were said, Carla and Julian stood outside the center again, this time under a sky full of stars. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore, it was sacred. I never expected any of this, he said softly. All of it started with a parking ticket. Carla chuckled. And a very expensive car. I'm glad you gave it to me. The ticket, no. The moment, the choice. You treated me like a person, not a problem. And that changed everything. She looked at him, her expression softening. You were never the problem, Julian. You were just lost. And now, you're finding your way. He took a step closer, not rushed, not hesitant, just steady. I don't know what comes next, Carla. But if I'm building a new life, I wanted to have you in it. She held his gaze. That's not a small thing you're asking. I know, and I'm not a simple woman. I know that too. She smiled slowly. Then, maybe, we start with coffee. Real coffee. None of that gas station nonsense. He laughed. Deal. And in that laughter, in that moment, under the stars, something sacred settled between them. Not fireworks, not declarations. Just a quiet beginning. Built not on perfection, but on truth, courage, and the beauty of two broken people choosing to walk forward together. Because sometimes, the most powerful love stories don't begin with magic. They begin with mistakes, and a choice to stay, a choice to care, a choice to believe. That second chance is a real and that maybe, just maybe, a traffic stop could change to lives forever.